What if I told you that your arteries could be filling with plaque at this very moment, even though you eat well and you exercise? Even though you do everything your doctor has ever told you to do? I know that sounds impossible, but let me tell you what happened to me, because it changed how I practice medicine for the rest of my career. How old are you? Type your age right now in the comments below. I read every single one, and in a moment you'll understand exactly why I'm asking. At 57 years old, I thought I was the healthiest person in any room I walked into. I ran half marathons most weekends. I followed a low-fat diet religiously. I had spent years running a preventive medicine program, teaching other physicians how to keep patients out of the cardiac unit. If anyone should have had clean, flexible arteries, it should have been me. Then I got scanned, and the number that came back nearly knocked me out of my chair. Here is what nobody tells you about heart disease. It doesn't wait for you to feel sick. It builds quietly, for years, while you're sleeping, while you're working, while you're convinced you're doing everything right. And by the time you feel a symptom, the damage is often already severe. I need to be crystal clear before going any further. Everything I share with you today comes from published research and from thousands of patient cases. But your body is unique. Nothing here replaces a conversation with your own doctor. Think of this as information you bring to that conversation, not a replacement for it. So let me take you back to that day, because what happened to me might be happening to you right now, without a single symptom to warn you. I was at a medical conference when a colleague mentioned a simple test most doctors never order. It's called a CIMT. It is just an ultrasound of the arteries in your neck. No needles, no radiation. 5 minutes, start to finish. I expected a clean result. I was ready to walk out of that room and brag about it for a week. Instead, the screen showed 2 distinct areas of plaque. And then came the number that really shook me. The test estimates something called your arterial age, how old your blood vessels actually behave, regardless of your birth certificate. Mine came back as 73. I was 57. Let that sink in. 16 years of damage that I never felt. Not once. It took me weeks to process that. Not days, weeks. Because here is the part that scares people the most, and I want you to hear it clearly. This wasn't a failure of willpower. I wasn't eating donuts in secret. I was doing the wrong version of right. Here is what most doctors don't have time to explain in a 7-minute visit. Cholesterol gets almost all the attention in a checkup. But there is a bigger driver of arterial plaque that rarely gets mentioned, and it is hiding in plain sight inside millions of people who think their blood sugar is fine. It's called metabolic disease. You may know it as prediabetes, or its more advanced form, type 2 diabetes. Researchers have actually known about this connection for a long time. What I didn't fully appreciate, even as a physician, is just how common it is and how silently it builds. So I did something most people never think to ask their doctor for. I ran what is called an oral glucose tolerance test. It is the single best test for catching hidden metabolic disease early, long before a routine blood sugar check would ever flag it. You drink a measured amount of glucose, and your blood sugar gets checked before, then again at 1 hour, then again at 2 hours. Mine peaked above 160. That single number meant I had enough underlying metabolic dysfunction to be quietly building plaque in my arteries, and I had absolutely no idea. My low-fat diet, the one I believed was protecting my heart, was loaded with refined grain carbohydrates. Bread, cereal, pasta. Every single one of those was spiking my blood sugar, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, every single day, for years. I want you to really hear this part. I wasn't doing everything wrong. I was doing the wrong version of right. Now here's the question that matters for you. How would you even know if this is happening inside your own body? Because here is what's terrifying about metabolic disease. It rarely announces itself. No chest pain, no dramatic symptom. Just a slow, silent process that can be quietly aging your arteries decades beyond your actual age. This is exactly why I built the plan I'm about to walk you through, step by step. The same plan that let me reverse my own plaque in a way that surprised even the specialists who reviewed my scans. By the end of this video, I will show you the most recent results, the ones that confirm decades of arterial damage can, in many cases, be slowed, stabilized, and in some cases meaningfully improved. But before getting to the plan, you need to understand what's actually happening inside an artery when this process begins. Because once you understand the mechanism, the solution will make complete sense, and you'll never look at a bowl of cereal the same way again. Picture your arteries the way you'd picture the old copper pipes running through a house built decades ago. When mineral deposits build up inside those pipes, pressure rises and the flow gets restricted. Your arteries work the same way, except instead of water pressure, what's at stake is the oxygen supply to your heart muscle itself. Now, here is where the system fails people, and I don't say that to attack any individual doctor. Most physicians are doing their best inside a structure that gives them 7 minutes per patient. There is no billing code for sitting down and explaining nutritional metabolic disease in detail. That is a system problem, not a reflection on your doctor's character or effort. Let me introduce you to someone whose story represents a pattern I have seen play out again and again in my practice. I'll call her Sandra. She is 67, a retired postal worker living in rural Virginia. She represents a pattern I've seen repeatedly, so if parts of her story sound familiar, that's exactly the point. Sandra came to see me after a routine checkup left her unsettled. Her primary doctor had mentioned her fasting blood sugar was a little high, but nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. That phrase had been following her around for 3 years. Picture her sitting across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. She leaned forward and said, "I walk every morning. I cut back on sweets years ago. Why does my doctor keep telling me my numbers are creeping up?" That question, that exact question, is the reason I'm making this video. Sandra had spent decades doing what she believed was right. Whole wheat toast for breakfast, brown rice instead of white, low-fat yogurt, all the advice she'd absorbed for 30 years, from magazines, from doctors, from well-meaning family members, and none of it was protecting her the way she thought it was. I'll come back to Sandra in a few minutes, because what I discovered in her case connects directly to the next part of this plan. But first, you need the full picture of what's actually driving this damage, because once you see it clearly, everything else makes sense. Now let's get into the actual plan. 6 steps. I followed every one of them myself, and they are the same 6 steps I now walk patients through. Step 1. Test, don't guess. You cannot fix a problem you've never actually measured, and the tests that matter most are almost never the ones showing up on a standard annual checkup. The CIMT scan I mentioned earlier is a strong starting point. It can reveal soft, unstable plaque, the kind most likely to rupture and cause a heart attack, often years before any symptom would ever appear. Beyond that, there are inflammation markers worth asking your doctor about, including C-reactive protein and LPLA2. Both are simple blood tests. They help tell you whether existing plaque is calm and stable or hot and at higher risk of causing a clot. And there's one more measurement that rarely gets discussed. Visceral fat. Not your total body weight, not even your BMI. Visceral fat is the fat that wraps around your internal organs, and it's one of the strongest drivers of insulin resistance there is. A body composition scan, sometimes called a DEXA scan, can show you exactly how much of it you're carrying. You cannot fix what you refuse to measure. That single sentence changed the entire direction of my career. Now, I need to be crystal clear about something before you go any further. If you are currently taking any medication for blood sugar, blood pressure, or cholesterol, nothing in this video is telling you to stop. Please continue your medication exactly as prescribed and bring these test names to your next appointment so you and your doctor can discuss whether they're appropriate for you. Step 2. Cut the carbohydrates that are actually causing harm. Once I understood that my real problem was blood sugar, not fat, everything about how I approached food changed. The question stopped being, is this healthy? It became, what is this doing to my blood sugar right now? Here's something that surprises almost everyone. Non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, asparagus, leafy greens, Brussels sprouts, these are not the problem. The real driver, for most people, is refined grain, bread, pasta, rice, white potatoes, and yes, oatmeal. I know it carries that heart-healthy label, but check your own blood sugar 30 minutes after a bowl, and you may be surprised by what you see. Think of a sudden blood sugar spike the way you'd think of pouring gasoline directly onto a small flame. The research suggests that once post-meal blood sugar climbs above roughly 140, inflammation in the artery wall tends to begin. One spike, occasionally, your body can absorb. But 2 or 3 spikes a day, every day, for years, that is a very different story. I replaced refined carbohydrates with eggs, avocado, salmon, olive oil, and large amounts of non-starchy vegetables. foods that kept my blood sugar flat for hours instead of spiking and crashing. Now, here is the part I need to be honest about, because the studies aren't perfect and your results may not match mine exactly. Some people respond to lower carbohydrate eating very quickly. Others take longer, and a smaller number need a more gradual approach, especially anyone managing kidney concerns or already on insulin. This is exactly the kind of change to discuss with your doctor before making it, particularly if you take any blood sugar lowering medication, because reducing carbohydrates while still taking a full medication dose can sometimes push blood sugar too low. That conversation matters. If you do experience an unexpected spike, even a short walk afterward can help. Movement pulls glucose out of the bloodstream and into the muscle, where it's used safely instead of irritating the artery wall. Bridge to step 3. But understanding food was only half of what I needed to fix. The other half, and this surprised me more than anything else in this entire process, was about how I was actually using my body. Step 3. Exercise with intensity, not just endurance. I had been running long distances for years. I assumed that alone protected me. It didn't. Long, steady cardio builds aerobic fitness, but it does a surprisingly modest job of improving insulin resistance, which is the actual root of this whole problem. I was proof of that. I was fit, and I still had plaque. Here's the piece almost nobody talks about. Your leg muscles are your single largest tool for pulling glucose out of your bloodstream, especially when those muscles are worked with some intensity. Long-distance runners often carry relatively little leg muscle mass, which means less tissue available to clear that sugar. I added short bursts of higher intensity effort, around 90% effort for 40 to 60 seconds, followed by recovery, repeated a small number of times. Some call this reduced exertion high-intensity training. You can complete an entire session in roughly 5 minutes. I also added simple resistance work focused on the legs, nothing complicated. Wall sits, lunges, calf raises, totaling about 5 minutes, once or twice a day. If a full lunge feels like too much right now, a supported step on a staircase works as a starting point. Now I need to be crystal clear here too. If you have any heart condition, joint replacement, or balance concern, please get clearance from your doctor before adding higher intensity intervals, and always start at a level that feels challenging but controlled, never to the point of pain or dizziness. If you feel chest discomfort, lightheadedness, or unusual shortness of breath during any of this, stop immediately and seek medical attention. The goal here was never fitness for its own sake. It was metabolic function. Short, intense effort on the legs appears to do more for blood sugar control than hours of slow, steady cardio alone. Though I want to be fair, slow cardio still matters. It's simply not the whole picture. Diet and movement made up roughly the bulk of the progress I saw. But there was a remaining piece I had been ignoring completely, and it was quietly undoing some of my progress without my realizing it. Step 4. Address the roadblocks hiding in plain sight. Sleep was the first one. I told myself I functioned fine on 5 or 6 hours. I was wrong. Poor sleep raises cortisol, and cortisol raises blood sugar, and elevated blood sugar drives the same inflammation I've been describing throughout this video. Research has shown that even a single night of poor sleep can measurably worsen insulin resistance for the following 48 hours. One night. I also discovered I had mild sleep apnea I never knew about. My airway was narrower than it should be, and at night, especially on my back, it was partially restricting my breathing. I addressed the structural piece with an orthodontic device that gradually widened my dental arch, and I trained myself to sleep on my side. Both my apnea symptoms and my blood pressure improved, and it showed up directly in my follow-up labs. If you snore heavily, wake up gasping, or feel exhausted no matter how many hours you sleep, please mention this to your doctor. Untreated sleep apnea carries real cardiovascular risk on its own. The second roadblock was breathing itself. Most people breathe somewhere around 15 to 20 breaths per minute without ever thinking about it. Slowing that down to roughly 7 to 10 breaths per minute appears to activate what's sometimes called the body's natural calming response through the vagus nerve. Inhale for about 4 to 5 seconds. Exhale for 6 to 8 seconds for around 10 minutes. I noticed a measurable drop in my own blood pressure readings once I made this a daily habit. And the third roadblock was chronic stress, which runs through the exact same biological pathway as poor sleep. Cortisol, inflammation, plaque. If your nervous system rarely gets a chance to rest, your arteries rarely get a chance to fully repair either. I know that sounds like soft, secondary advice compared to diet and exercise, but fear alone doesn't sustain change over years. Purpose does. For me, that meant staying capable for the people I love and turning what started as a frightening diagnosis into something that might help someone else avoid the same wake-up call. Now let's go back to Sandra, because this is exactly where her story took an unexpected turn. After reviewing her labs together, I ran that same oral glucose tolerance test. Her fasting number looked unremarkable, but her 1-hour reading told a very different story. It climbed well into the range associated with early metabolic dysfunction, the kind that rarely shows up on a basic annual panel. Picture her staring at that printout for a long moment before she finally said, 30 years of whole wheat toast, and nobody ever checked this. I'm not going to pretend the first few weeks were easy for her. They weren't. Week 1, she told me honestly, I'm tired, and I miss my toast. That discomfort is normal, and if you experience something similar, it does not mean the approach isn't working. It often means your body is adjusting away from relying on quick sugar spikes for energy. By week 3, her energy had started to stabilize. Her afternoon crashes, the ones she'd blamed on just getting older for years, became noticeably less frequent. That is usually the point where people start to believe this might actually be working. Before moving to supplements and medication, I need to give you a realistic timeline, because if I don't, you might quit right when things are about to turn a corner. Week 1 is usually the hardest. Your body is adjusting to fewer blood sugar spikes, and that can feel like low energy or mild irritability. It's annoying. It's also temporary. Week 2 tends to bring more stable energy, with fewer of those dramatic afternoon crashes. Week 3 is often where people notice the first real shift. Clothes fitting differently, sleep feeling deeper, that fog lifting a little. By week 4 and beyond, many people see actual movement in their lab numbers, not just how they feel day to day. Most people give up around day 3, right before momentum starts building. If you feel that pull to quit early on, that discomfort is often a sign your body is recalibrating, not a sign that something is wrong. Step 5. Use supplements strategically, not randomly. For most of my career, I was skeptical of supplements. Finding plaque in my own arteries forced me to actually dig into the research, and some of what I found did surprise me. Let me be honest about the limits here too. Supplements cannot outperform a poor diet, inconsistent movement, or chronic sleep deprivation. They support the foundation. They don't replace it. Vitamin D3, around 5,000 international units daily, addresses a deficiency linked to higher inflammation and cardiovascular risk that's extremely common, especially in places with limited sun exposure. I pair it with vitamin K2, around 400 micrograms daily, well above the small amount found in most combination supplements, because vitamin K2 plays a role in calcium metabolism within the artery wall itself. Now, I need to be crystal clear about this pairing. If you are taking a blood thinner, such as warfarin, vitamin K2 can interfere with how that medication works. Please talk to your doctor before adding it, and never start or stop a blood thinner-related supplement without medical guidance. Niacin is worth mentioning separately because the evidence on it is genuinely interesting. It appears to favorably shift several cardiovascular markers at once. But it is not for everyone. Niacin can cause flushing, and at higher doses, it can affect liver enzymes and blood sugar control, so it should only be used under medical supervision, never self-prescribed at high doses. Magnesium supports several hundred processes in the body, including blood pressure regulation. If you have significant kidney disease, magnesium supplementation requires medical guidance, since impaired kidneys may not clear excess magnesium efficiently. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil have reasonably strong evidence for cardiovascular support. If you're on a blood thinner, mention any new fish oil supplementation to your doctor as well, since very high doses combined with blood thinners can increase bleeding risk. For anyone exploring options specifically aimed at plaque stability, aged garlic extract and nattokinase both have some direct evidence behind them. Nattokinase in particular should be discussed with your doctor if you're already on any blood-thinning medication for the same bleeding risk reasons. Start low. Never exceed the dosing your doctor approves for your specific situation. And if you notice unusual bruising, bleeding, dizziness, or any new symptom after starting a supplement, stop and contact your doctor right away. Step 6. Use medication strategically when it's appropriate, never as a replacement for the work above. I want to address something directly. because I know how this sounds to some of you. A lot of people assume doctors only prescribe medication for financial reasons. I understand that skepticism. But here is the honest truth from someone who spent most of his career being cautious, even reluctant, about prescribing. Medication, used appropriately, can be a genuinely powerful tool for closing remaining gaps, but only alongside the lifestyle work, never instead of it. When I found plaque in my own arteries, after reviewing the evidence carefully, I did add a low-dose statin. Not primarily to chase a cholesterol number, but because research suggests low-dose statins can meaningfully reduce vascular inflammation, which is the same inflammation I've described throughout this video. There's a real difference between a small, strategic dose used specifically for someone with confirmed plaque and a high daily dose used broadly for cholesterol alone. This is a nuanced decision that belongs entirely between you and your physician. Blood pressure medication came next for me once my numbers stayed elevated despite lifestyle changes. Certain classes of blood pressure medication appear to offer some anti-inflammatory benefit on top of pressure control, which is worth discussing with your doctor if your numbers haven't responded fully to diet and exercise alone. Once plaque is confirmed through imaging, low-dose aspirin is something many doctors will discuss, because at that point, you've moved from prevention into active management of existing disease. This decision carries real risks and benefits that vary by individual, including bleeding risk, so it absolutely requires a direct conversation with your physician, never self-initiation. And metformin, often associated purely with blood sugar control, also shows some evidence for improving insulin sensitivity even in people without full diabetes at carefully managed doses. I want to repeat this because it matters enormously. None of these medications replace the lifestyle work. They support it while the underlying cause gets addressed. And please, never adjust, reduce, or stop any prescribed medication without your doctor's direct guidance, even if you feel your lifestyle changes are working well. That conversation should happen together, gradually, under medical supervision. If you found this helpful so far, hit like, not for me, but because it helps this information reach someone else who might be sitting exactly where I was at 57, convinced they're doing everything right. Now let's go back to Sandra one final time, because her story is where all 6 of these steps came together. 3 months in, Sandra's follow-up labs told a different story than the one she'd been hearing for years. Her 1-hour glucose tolerance number had dropped meaningfully. Her energy, by her own description, felt like it did 15 years ago. She'd added the walking intervals, switched her breakfast away from toast, and started taking vitamin D after testing confirmed she was deficient. I want to be honest with you about something important. Sandra's results were on the stronger end of what I typically see. Not everyone moves this quickly, and that's completely normal. Some people see changes within weeks. Others take several months. What matters most isn't the speed, it's the direction. Sandra herself put it simply when she said, "Nobody told me 30 years of toast could do this. I just wish I'd known sooner." Now let me show you what this same approach did for my own arteries, because I've continued tracking it every single year since that first frightening scan. My most recent imaging, a more advanced scan that analyzes not just how much plaque exists, but its actual composition, showed something I genuinely didn't expect. The soft, unstable plaque, the kind most associated with sudden cardiac events, was essentially undetectable. Total plaque volume remained, with roughly a third of it fully calcified and stable, the kind that is, in a sense, already locked in place. Narrowing in even my most affected artery measured under 20%, which research associates more commonly with someone decades younger than my current age. My arterial age on the original test, the same one that read 73 at 57, now reads closer to my late 50s, despite carrying a diabetes diagnosis and a known genetic cardiovascular risk variant. I'm not telling you this to suggest everyone gets identical results. Genetics, starting point, and consistency all play a role, and results vary across studies and across individuals. What I am telling you is this: the direction matters more than perfection, and it is never too late to change that direction. Type "I finished" in the comments if you made it all the way through this video. And then do one more thing for me. Share it with one specific person. Your spouse, your sibling, the friend who's been told their numbers are a little high, but nothing to worry about. That phrase has followed too many people for too long. Everything I shared today is educational, based on published research and clinical patterns I've observed across many patients, including composite cases like Sandra's. It is not a substitute for personalized medical care. Please bring these test names and questions to your own doctor before making any changes to your diet, supplements, or medication. I want to take a moment here to talk about why this information so often slips through the cracks in the first place, because understanding that is part of what protects you going forward. It isn't that your doctor doesn't care. Most physicians genuinely want to help, but the structure they work inside rarely gives them the time this conversation deserves. A 7-minute visit leaves almost no room to explain an oral glucose tolerance test, walk through inflammation markers, or sit with you while you process a number like 73 at 57. That isn't a personal failing. That's a system built around volume, not depth. And the guidelines many offices still follow were largely shaped using data from younger, lower-risk populations, which means the advice handed to someone in their 60s or 70s doesn't always fit their actual risk profile. That's the gap this video is trying to close, not by replacing your doctor, but by giving you sharper questions to bring into that room with you. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with one more open question, because it connects directly to everything you just learned. There's a number even more predictive of arterial risk than the cholesterol figure most people fixate on every single year at their checkup. It's called apolipoprotein B. In the next video, I'll walk you through exactly what it means, why it might matter more for you than LDL ever did, and how to ask your doctor for it. Do not let anyone tell you it is too late, because it is not.